it stopped raining. We took off our rain clothes, and then it rained while it was sunny. So it's just kind of like, well, you know what? I guess this was just a day of rain. Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
So today we're going to talk about day 4 in the winds. As you know, the night before we'd fallen asleep having our little slumber party with our new friend Lucy. And this morning, honestly, was a lazy morning. First of all, our tents were so wet. And I think that the interesting thing was it didn't really rain that night, right? I think it didn't rain. It was just condensation.
Yeah, and if anyone feels like they've really conquered this dilemma, please let us know what you do. But I had written in my journal that we had clear skies and sunshine outside, but the inside of our tent was full of condensation and our sleeping quilts were wet. And I feel like our Nemo Hornet tent is pretty breathable, but we still have issues with, moisture getting trapped in our tent. And I don't know if it's just because it's 2 people in a very small space breathing. But yeah, that's sometimes a downer when it's a little bit chilly and it hasn't rained, but you actually are just dealing with wet stuff on the inside of your tent.
So I think that probably contributed to our very, very slow leaving camp. Although, as you know, we also are slow sometimes. And honestly, Lucy was pretty slow that morning too. So we were kind of surprised when it was 9 a.m. and she was still there hanging out, visiting with us. But then she got into through hiker gear and was able to just pack up her stuff. And we said our goodbyes.
I think she maybe would have hung out with us on the trail until she realized, like, oh, these girls, when they say they leave late, they leave like super late. And then, so then she headed off, and then I think she forgot something. So then she popped back to camp and we're like, oh, good to see you again. And then, she hit the trail, which she, when people are through hiking, you've got a lot of miles that you have to go in a weather window of summer. And usually people get very early starts, but she said that her brand is that she didn't mind having a later start, but then she was always able to make up the miles with her pace.
So we finally got our stuff ready and got our butts in gear and we're leaving camp. And I feel like then the clouds started rolling in and I was like, oh my gosh, did we just hang out in camp trying to dry out our tent for all this time and then we're just going to get rained on? But fortunately, we were able to outrun the rain for just a little while. I did write in my journal that going over the passes that day finally felt good. And I think I wrote, maybe it just takes a little while to acclimatize.
I know in my journal I said, finally, a day that didn't feel hard. And it just felt so good to walk on a trail and to be able to stretch out our legs and just feel good about it versus the previous several days. Every step just required so much effort. And I think Carrie was on to something. Perhaps acclimatizing just takes a little bit of time. And in the winds, you get high and you stay high. So you better be used to altitude. We cruised up the first pass. And like Carrie said, even though there were some rain clouds gathering on the horizon, fortunately, we were still ahead of them. And so we could enjoy just the view from this pass. And this one, I think it was less than 1,000 feet of climbing to get up there. So it was making you work for it a little bit, but it was still just one of those, like, just a nice grade and an enjoyable hike to begin the day.
I do think, wasn't it really like humid? I feel like that was making things a little bit unpleasant for me where I was like, oh, why am I so weak? It's just like humidity. And I think we took off, I feel like we took off our packs so we could like change into, I don't know, like take off our sun hoodies. And then we started walking and I feel like pretty soon after that, the rain caught up to us. So then of course you have to do, the whole thing where you put on your rain pants, you put on your rain jacket, which thankfully that had dried out super well that morning in camp when we'd spent forever not leaving camp, which by the way, no mouse had gotten into our tent or into any of our belongings. I feel like that was kind of a little, cliffhanger on the last episode that I forgot about by this day. So anyway, it started raining again. We had to, of course, then like ford another creek. There were quite a few, and these were pretty easy fords. Honestly, it was like still water, just very simple fords, but we had to ford another little creek. And so then you have to kind of fix your pants,
Carrie was so over it because once again, we were playing this game in the winds of like cold weather with rain where you kind of needed some rain pants and raincoat, but then it'd be like warm and sunny and then always you're hiking. So you're kind of generating some body heat. And so when we got to this crossing, Carrie was like, I'm so over it. So she just unzipped the bottom part of her rain pants so that she could literally lift them up and tuck them into her waistband. Like, what are those puffy pants that people would wear in like the 1800s?
Britches?
I don't know. Maybe. Like when you see all the people with their colonial look and with those breeches, maybe. Anyway, so Carrie tucked those in to her waistband so that she could just cross and then not have to like take her rain pants off and not have to deal with wet rain pants either. So, yeah, we were kind of finding the groove of not taking the time to just take things off and on again, but just made it work for what we could do.
And also trying to stay at least somewhat comfortable while you hiked. This day was a little bit funny when we had our lunchtime because, again, it was just cold and it was rainy. And so Molly and I have this very strong memory of the day where we decide we're going to finally have lunch, but it's, it's just so cold. So we sat back to back underneath a tree and we ate our little trail pizzas, maybe. I don't know. And I remember I did have some Tostitos. So at least there was that. But it's just kind of a funny mental picture. I think that some people walked past us and I thought, man, we must have looked pretty sorry. But they probably felt pretty sorry themselves.
And it was so chilly that we had to lean against each other for warmth. So we were just doing the human backrest where each person puts even pressure and then you can kind of sit and lean against. And yeah, definitely when we weren't moving and walking, it was chilly, but it was hard to justify pulling out a puffy or something because it was all just so damp and we didn't want to get that wet anyways. And we knew we were just going to start walking and then get hot again. So it was a funny temperature where it was kind of an inconvenient balance either way. We started to ascend the second pass of the day, and so I bet you guessed it, we had to then stop and take off our rain pants and raincoats because we were starting to get warm. And on our way up to the next pass, we met a group of a couple guys, and they'd been exploring some different areas. I think they'd made up like a base camp by a lake, and then they were just heading out to explore different areas over the course of the day. And so, was it Europe Canyon, Carrie? They had headed up to Europe Canyon, and then I think they had to turn around early because they saw the thunderstorm kind of clouds on the horizon, decided that they didn't want to mess with that up above tree line. So we got to see them as they were heading down.
Also, one thing that was funny was I wrote in my journal that it stopped raining, we took off our rain clothes, and then it rained while it was sunny. So it's just kind of like, well, you know what? I guess this was just a day of rain.
And then I think shortly after we took off our rain clothes, we like got to the top of the pass, and then we were just heading, like you said, in the sun with raindrops, and then it was cold again. And I can't remember if we then put something on. Yeah, so we should have been keeping account of how many times we put our gear on and off this day. I think it was probably like 8 times.
The person who makes a rain jacket that you can put on over your pack is going to be a rich fellow. I guess I should learn that so that I could be the rich fellow. So we got service at some point along this time, and for some reason we thought, we'd better check the weather. And of course, severe thunderstorms were right in our, in the forecast for our area, which honestly felt kind of discouraging. So not really sure why we felt the need to check that. I feel like that's something we could have just found out in real time, right? So as we were kind of just continuing on our downhill walking, and this was during a period of actual sun, we ran into a couple of people that we'd seen our very first day. It was the meteorologists. And so that was kind of a funny experience because I think Molly and I had just been talking about them a couple miles before, like, I wonder how they're doing because they were going to start, the Wind River High Route at Big Sandy. So at the opposite of us, kind of, I wonder how that was going for them. I wonder if, they're having a good time. And then just a few minutes later, they kind of had gotten a little bit off the trail. So they were coming up they literally burst out of the woodworks basically. Yeah. And we're like, oh, hello. And we were like, oh my goodness, we've been thinking of you. And they've been thinking of us. And so I think that they had been on the high route for a little bit and then kind of fallen behind their itinerary, decided to bounce off and get a little bit lower. Plus there was, so much rain and thunderstorms. So I think that they were going to maybe just finish rolling on the CDT. But then of course, it's like we'd made our decision, we were just going to cruise on the CDT. And then they're there saying like, oh, you know what? You probably could just pop right on the high route.
And of course, the forecast, we were still dealing with the potential for rainstorms and thunderstorms this day, but then it seemed like the forecast was a little bit more favorable, which you can't rely on fully. But so then, that had to tease us for a moment, like, oh gosh, do we get back on? But I think Carrie and I at this point, you could kind of you could think about it for fun, but in reality, we knew that what we were doing was the best plan for us this time. And we were kind of both excited to just continue along the CDT and see what that had to offer, because we'd already decided that we were going to be heading back to the winds at some point. So we didn't have to do everything in one trip. We could enjoy where this trip was leading us and then come back for more down the road. And so with that couple, we were thinking about them because we were 4 days in, and initially we were planning to do 8 days. And so we knew that we were kind of around our halfway point, and so they probably were as well. And so it's ironic how that happens on trail, when sometimes someone will pop into your mind and then, within the hour, there they are. I don't understand how that works, but it's always cool when that does happen.
Yes, so we cruised along the trail a little bit, and I feel like we were trying to go fast because we were currently ahead of rain. And then, of course, we round the bend, and there's these really beautiful lakes, and there's these 3 fishermen, and they're just having a good time. And I don't know if I started talking to one of them, just thinking it'd be a pretty quick conversation. And then, they were pretty interesting to visit with. They wanted to hear about our experiences in the backcountry because they were from Washington. So we had done a lot of things that they either wanted to do or they'd done, some of the same things as us. And so I don't know, Molly, do you think we stood there for half an hour visiting with them?
It was a good amount of time, and it was so fun to visit with them. I feel like we split our time between you visited with 2 and I visited with 1, and we got to learn about each of their stories and the different things that they had done in the Pacific Northwest. And then when we got back on the trail, we could swap and be like, well, this is what the guy I talked to did. And Carrie was like, well, these are what these cute 2 guys knew about. So that was really fun. And
it's good to have something new to talk about.
Totally, yes. That's why I always tell Carrie, sometime before a long trip, we should both read a different book, and then we can swap stories and just tell the book to each other. It just give you some new topic of conversation. But so we visited with them, and this was kind of the point where it looked like it was almost going to catch us when it came to the rain. But then I think that the rain never actually got us. But to the north of us, there were just these angry clouds. And I think we maybe even heard some thunder rumble. But fortunately, the rainstorm decided that that was as far as it was going to go. And we got to just kind of eke out and then actually start to experience some sun after that.
We finally were consistently getting sun, and we crossed this little ford. And then when we got to the other side, we just wanted to sit and enjoy the sun, because who knows, the sun could be gone in 5 minutes, or it could be sunny and raining on us in the next minute. So we kind of just sat down to enjoy the sun and try to dry a few things out. I have a couple of videos from this point, and it's funny because my camera lens is completely fogged over because it's just been so wet all day. But we sat down, and I wrote in my journal that we just kind of reaffirmed our decision, that we didn't feel the need to do the high route, that we were going to come back and do it at a later time, hopefully, and we didn't need to kind of we were happy with our plan. So we kind of just went over that one last time, and then had a few snacks. And of course, I sat on an anthill, and they were just going gangbusters at me. So I didn't really enjoy that aspect of it. But we weren't very far away from where we planned to camp that night. We were going to camp at Sandpoint Lake because we heard it's a very pretty place to watch a sunset. And I think that would put us at about 13 or so miles for the day. And we didn't feel the need to really go a ton of miles. However, we knew there was a storm coming. So we continued on our way until we reached Sandpoint Lake. And it honestly was really pretty. It was kind of a long lake. It had some nice views, but as we got there, we kind of realized it was a place where there was like absolutely no cover or good options for actually pitching a tent. I think that maybe some people pitch it right by the lake, but we weren't going to do that. And other than that, it just seemed like we would have to kind of go way up into the hills next to it and try to seek out a good spot.
Yeah, and so we realized that kind of no matter where we were going to pitch our tent, even if we went up the hill and kind of found a tree, it really was just very sandy all around the lake. And after our experience on Mount Hood the year before, pitching in really sandy soil and then having wind come down at us, we realized that we really wanted some firm ground to anchor our tent into. So we decided that we were not going to be pitching our tent by Sandpoint Lake, but we really hadn't gone for any swims this trip. And there are so many beautiful lakes that would be worthy of taking a dip in. But I think just the combo of either the thunderstorms or the cold and then just like brief times of like sunlight and warmth while we were out of the winds so far had prevented us from really getting the courage to actually get in the water and swim. So Carrie and I, we kind of started to wade into the lake, and it was so cold. We could only make it in about maybe waist deep, or maybe not even that deep. But at that point, we decided we didn't want to take the entire plunge and go all the way in and get wet. But we did enjoy standing in the water for a bit and then sitting on the side of the lake while we dried off.
I thought we actually did. We didn't get our hair wet, but I thought we put everything else in. Yeah, because I think that I decided I was doing my bath.
Oh, interesting. Maybe we kind of like hunched over and kind of like got in, but I feel like I didn't actually like swim, like actually like kick and stroke.
No, that's correct. If your definition of swimming is kicking, we did not swim, but we didn't only I think that we were at first just only going to go to our waist, and then it was like, we're already in here. This is our bath for probably the week, so let's just go ahead and take care of business minus the hair. And then I think we thought, well, we're going to get out and we're going to just like sun ourselves on the edge of the lake. But then it was just like so windy and cold. I feel like we were like, okay, I actually brought a towel with me for the first time ever on this trip. And I mean, it's a very tiny towel, but I think that we kind of tried to use that to dry ourselves off a tiny bit. And then we said, okay, we'll just keep on going because this isn't a good option for us. So we knew we were going to have about 3.5 miles more to go, which meant that our day was going to end up being around 16 or 16 and a half miles. So we kind of decided, okay, we got to get things in gear. But really the rest of the distance that we had to cross to get there, I don't think there was too much elevation gain or anything like that. It was just pretty cruisy, and we were finally acclimated, and we'd had that very crisp and refreshing little dip. So we were kind of just ready to cruise. But anyways, one of the kind of neat things about this area was where we kind of started getting a really good view of the Wind River Range. Molly has been kind of like looking at the map and noticing how when we first started this trip, you kind of got to go through the winds, and then it's kind of like you're paralleling the range, but it starts to be a really cool view. Like you feel like you're in some kind of a Western movie. So I just remember really vividly kind of traveling, and we grabbed some water, and I don't think we even saw anyone. I wrote in my journal, we didn't see anyone the last like 2 or 3 miles to camp. It was just peaceful and quiet. It was just us. We got our water because we knew that we were using Far Out to try and find kind of a location for where we would like to camp that night. And we knew we'd probably have a dry campsite. So we grabbed some extra water for the night. And then we kind of continued on our way. And as we were on this little ridge, we kept kind of just popping off because there's no real campsites, on this trail. So I remember we just kept popping off to see if we could find a good site. And it was like, Molly would go one way, I'd go the other way, and it'd be kind of like, nah, this isn't good. But then we kept being like, man, but this would be such a cool view. But it was not sheltered from wind. So we continued on until we found this really nice little campsite on like this absolutely perfect bed of pine needles. And what, Molly?
And plenty of animal poop as well. So we were the first creatures to find that area nice to bed down for the night. But yeah, like Carrie mentioned, we, as we cruised along, it was pretty sandy soil that we were traveling across. To the point where I almost thought I was going to get a blister just from walking in sand for so long. And then, as Carrie also mentioned, we're still in the Wind River Range. I mean, we were at 10,000 feet at this point, but the really sharp granite peaks were off to the to the east of us. And at one point, it kind of like the views down to the valley below opened up, and you could tell that in relation to like the rest of that area of the state, we were pretty high, but still compared to the other peaks, we're like 2,000 or more feet below them. So we found this really pleasant grove of trees, and Carrie and I, we had to kind of sacrifice our dream for just this epic sunset against the mountains because we just didn't feel comfortable pitching our tent in an area that had so few trees. There were some trees, but there weren't any good areas to really pitch a tent close to one, and we just didn't want to camp without anything to break the wind. So we found, once again, this perfect grove of trees. The pine needles on the ground were just this perfect little soft bed for us to pitch our tent, and then we got to kind of set up everything to make our supper and watch a really beautiful sunset.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Two Sisters on Adventures, and we hope that you guys will keep joining us and listening to our adventures. And if you have a suggestion for what series you'd like to hear next, we've still got a few weeks left in the winds for you guys, a few days in real time. But if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to hear us talk about next, feel free to let us know. Thanks so much, you guys. Bye!